Hi, I'm Taylor Toby. I'm an OpenSciEd teacher and facilitator. I'm going to walk you through Lesson 5 of the 8.4 unit, Earth and Space. So, how did we get to this lesson? In the previous lesson, we figured out that solar elevation affects the intensity of light. This light intensity affects the energy transfer to Earth, which we experience as different temperatures and seasons on Earth. Students figure out that the northern and southern hemisphere are at opposite angles. So when the light is direct at the northern hemisphere, it is angled at the southern hemisphere. Therefore, the hemispheres experience opposite seasons. And we were left wondering, could we use this model to help us go back and explain Manhattanhenge? Let's take a look at this lesson. It is a putting the pieces together and problematizing lesson. It is one day, takes about 5 minutes of prep. There may be a little bit more depending on how you choose to have students model Manhattanhenge. They'll go back and look at a video, so yes, this will require devices. So looking at a snapshot of this lesson, we will figure out that yes, our model does help us figure out why these henge events only happen on certain days. And then we go back to our driving question board and wonder, are there other patterns that we haven't yet explained? Specifically in Lesson 5, students will figure out that there's this symmetry in the pattern of where the sun sets and rises. And due to the fixed tilt of Earth's axis, that is why there is that symmetry. So the day before or the day after a henge event, the sun is slightly over either way and would be behind a building, and you would not have the henge event. Let's look at a key moment in Lesson 5. This is when students develop a consensus model and figure out why Manhattanhenge is happening. I highly recommend going back through and having students look at all their progress trackers and all the models that were created before this lesson, just to kind of like recap and help them put the pieces together before they start actually trying to put the pieces together in one model. This is a really good time to draw connections between the path of the sun that they figured out in lessons 2 and 4, as well as those solar graphs from lesson 3, and have them see how those different models, the graphical display and the drawing model, how those can fit together to help us explain Manhattanhenge. You can do a two-dimensional drawing as pictured below, but I also saw in the Facebook group that a teacher had their students make a 3D model, which I think is a really cool connection to that pipe cleaner lab they did before seeing the path of the sun. I definitely want to try it out with my group this year. I think that it will help them understand the path of the sun a little bit better than just drawing lines on paper. After revisiting the driving question board, we realized, hey, we had these patterns for the moon that we wrote down and we had questions about, but we haven't figured that out yet. So we want to go there next. We want to try and explain what's happening with the moon. Some material management tips and tricks for navigating the home learning and the navigation to get to those lunar phases. I found that a lot of my students would not be going out at night to look at the moon, and so they would just look at a picture online. So to get them thinking more in terms of patterns and what's happening over time, I had them look at lunar calendars for the months leading up to the current day we were going to be at. And they were using that to help them figure out trends that they noticed in order to predict what the next phase of the moon would look like. I found that they had much richer conversations than if they went and looked outside. But if you think your students would enjoy going outside and looking at the moon and planning it that way, that is excellent. I adjusted to fit my learners' needs. Poster management for this lesson. You will be going back to the parts and interactions that help explain Manhattanhenge way back from lesson 1 and your driving question board for the navigation to get to lesson 6. During this lesson, you'll be creating your consensus model, but you won't have to keep it. It's a good wrap-up of this lesson set. Thank you so much for joining me in discussing Lesson 5. I hope you and your students feel a sense of accomplishment getting through explaining that anchoring phenomenon and are really excited to figure out what's going on with the moon. See you in the next lesson.